And we're live. I'm here with Pete Quinones. Pete, how you doing?
What's going on, Caleb? How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Happy to have you on. Going to talk about the Populist Delusion by I was gonna say AA. I can't say his
Nima Parvini.
Nima Parvini. Yeah, great guy. I just started watching him probably about 2 months ago, and I was just blown away.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Really, how to put this? I know a lot of people who are well read, and he takes the cake of well read people. It is insane how many books that guy reads. But.
Well, and also the fact that he can take that knowledge and package it and give it to us. It's pretty amazing. I was honored to be on a cigar stream of his last year talking about Ted Kaczynski. That was a lot of fun.
Nice. I heard that it was really fun. First, I think that was the first time I heard him, but I wasn't like in the whole neo-reactionary circles yet, so I didn't pay much attention. But going back and listening to it again, like, yeah, I should have paid more attention. But yeah, so I'm gonna do a book club on the Populist Delusion, talk about Elite series, the different authors in here. Right out of the gate, I want to say a lot of information of how short the book is. I mean, it's straight through. A chapter's like 30 minutes long, and it covers so many people. I mean, if you wanted to read everyone in this book, it would probably take you a year to go through every single person. Maybe 2 years for one of the guys. I think it was which one had I forgot who had the really big one, big book. Was it the Monster or no?
Well,
one of them.
Leviathan and Its Enemies, Francis is a long book.
Yeah. I'm trying to go through it now, and it's just trying to get through that and Imperium at the same time, and it's a lot.
Yeah, reading two books at the same time is always fun.
yeah.
But yeah, it's only 147 pages. There's nothing in there that is wasted. I mean, everything is meat. And then you have another almost 20 pages of footnotes and the books that he read for it. I mean, so it's honestly, this may be the best political theory primer that I've ever seen.
Yeah. I would agree. This was the first. It was actually the second book I ever read involving stuff on Elite series, and so it was just a lot of you hear on podcasts or you kind of read here and there on Twitter, but to kind of get it distilled and focused in one book was really helpful instead of having to go and try to read Burnham, Samuel T. Francis, Godfrey, and all the other people whose names I can't pronounce. That's a lot, and to condense it on to 140 something pages in this, and it's not even that expensive either for how much you're getting out of it. This is a phenomenal book.
Yeah, the fact that he basically, here's the way I describe it. It's the Machiavellians, but added onto the Machiavellians, you have Samuel T. Francis and what's his name? Okay, Paul Gottfried. So it's like the Machiavellians, but with updates. And what's funny is with two people who knew James Burnham. So you're basically like the whole book is people that influenced Burnham to write the Machiavellians, and then talks about Burnham, and then it ends with two of his, call them students, but more like compatriots.
Yeah. His chapter on Burnham, I did not know how Burnham influenced George Orwell. That was an interesting little tidbit. He just kind of dropped it, and I'm like, now I want to go back and reread Animal Farm and see if I can just notice anything different about it, because I haven't read that in years, but I really enjoyed it last time I read it.
Well, when I found out that 1984 was about Britain in 1948, that he just changed the two numbers, that blew me away. But it also made sense, after when you look at the what happened after Nuremberg, how the world was going to be. So yeah, that actually made a lot of sense too when I found out that Orwell had done that as well.
Yeah, it all kind of clicked into place once you hear it laid out with a little bit of knowledge you have on like history or the Nuremberg trials or Weimar Germany. Kind of all like lines up and it kind of clicks at the same moment. Like, oh, it makes sense now. these little odd things you kind of hear here and there that don't make sense, and they always click right into place. But yeah, elite theory. I put this when it came to first hearing about and reading about elite theory, I had the same reaction I had when I first kind of heard about Austrian economics. Is that this makes sense, and this is very common sense, and this kind of comports to reality very easily. While most other political theories seem very much either pie in the sky or way too cynical, this one just seems to line up exactly with how reality operates, and this works.
I think it's very hard for people who, especially libertarians and political libertarians, it's hard for them to accept. They want to believe that they can change things. And yeah, I still believe you can change things at the local level. I think work can be done at the local level. But once people realize that mankind has always been ruled by elites, and if you want to make change in the direction that you want, you're going to have to replace the existing elites with your elites, with the elites that, people you like, the whole friend enemy distinction, the whole someone who's going to go in there and reward their friends and punish their enemies. Then it's really hard for people to accept, because people think that they can do things. People think they understand how the world works. I think a lot of people think that, believing that if people just read the right books and they just hear the right message, then everything will change, is actually literally democracy, is actually believing in democracy.
Yeah.
That you're going, that somehow a group of people are going to change people's minds, and then a whole bunch of people are going to rise up. And it's like those people never rise up without somebody pulling the strings for them. And I think that's very hard for people to understand. I really wish that, and it's another reason why a lot of libertarians hate Hoppe. Hoppe knows this. Hoppe knows the stuff that's in here, and he writes about it. And that's why, you'll see idiots on Facebook posting polls like, who's a bigger statist, Murray Rothbard or Hans Hermann Hoppe? And I'll be like, oh, Hoppe hands down and everything. It's like, why? Because he understands how the world works, and how the only way you're going to change it is by basically having to mess with the system.
I guess statist means comports to reality. I guess that's what that means now. But okay. Yeah,
hey, maybe memes are the way to go. Maybe memes are going to change the world. Maybe podcasts are going to change the world. Maybe the Libertarian Party is going to change the world. Maybe getting a great messenger out there and a second Ron Paul revolution is going to change the world. After reading books like this, sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah, I can't. I think reading this book and really understanding that populism doesn't really, how to put this, populism exists, but it doesn't really make changes. It just kind of inspires elites to notice something and make actions based on the people's wants. It's very difficult to see any solution that could work in a democratic system. Any solution that's in a democratic system that does not account for elites isn't going to function. And I think a lot of libertarians aren't who are the elites in the Libertarian Party? I can't think of anyone who's like a good elite in the Libertarian Party.
Well, that would be somebody that would have to be willing to take power, and that would be somebody who'd have to be willing to go up against the existing elites and replace them. I mean, and what does that take? What does that look like? I think those are questions that really should be answered. And when I ask them, I just get called black-pilled and things like that. So it's fine. I mean, it's fine. People, it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
I was thinking of like libertarian Hoppe and on elites and stuff. I recently reread Hoppe's book. Was it Nazi Elites, Intellectuals in the State, which is, I think that's my favorite Hoppe pamphlet, or Hoppe anything. Like I absolutely, you read that one, it all makes sense.
I'm gonna read that on my show one day. Even if I have to read it alone, I'm gonna read that on my show one day.
I got lucky. I got Hagfist over here. Did it with me on live reading. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's another thing about Hoppe is when you read Hoppe, he's really the only libertarian writer who writes about elites. The libertarian theorist who writes about elites, economist, whatever. I mean, Hoppe is everything, so it's kind of hard to to classify him, but he's the only one. And I think that's why, people read What Must Be Done and they're like, well, that's statism. You're playing inside the system. No one can beat the system and everything. It's like, okay, well, I mean, what can you do? I mean, but then just keep posting memes. I do it every day.
Yeah.
Keep doing podcasts. I do it every week. And keep reading books. I do it all the time. But there's what books are you reading? Who are you talking to on podcasts? And what kind of memes are you posting? And if you are becoming politically active, what are you planning? What's the plan? Because, I've been told by certain people that, well, we're doing Hoppe's What Must Be Done. Pete, what are you fighting against? We're doing Hoppe's What Must Be Done. And then in Hoppe's What Must Be Done, he talks about it. And throughout all of his writing, he talks about this is only going to work if the group doing it is explicitly right-wing. But Pete, we're going to create a libertarian culture. It's gonna replace the right-wing culture and the left-wing culture. And it's like Jose Nino said on my podcast recently, I don't want to know what a libertarian culture looks like.
Yeah. I wouldn't want, I can't even imagine. It's a libertarian culture would probably be like the culture Eric von Knudlin describes in Leftism. Talks about a truly agnostic democratic a truly agnostic Democrat can't ever say anything is wrong. He has to just say, well, you may believe that, I may believe that, but let's go about our day as if nothing is, there's no disagreement. A libertarian culture would just be everyone being indifferent to each other and everyone being terrible all the time. That just sounds awful and terrible for everyone.
Possibly, or it could be, it could be Ayn Rand's On Skepticism. I was talking with someone about that book this weekend. I'm not on skepticism, on selfishness. I was talking with someone about that. And then and then but then you're like, okay, so what is it? Legal weed? Is that what's gonna do it? Okay, I mean, people shouldn't be going to jail for stuff like that. I agree. But if that's what you're leading with, okay, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. I mean, it was like everybody got mad at Jacob Hornberger running for president, running to be the LP presidential candidate in 2020, because during the lockdowns, he's talking about open borders and taking away people's Social Security. Read the fucking room. I mean, read the room. Yeah. I mean, they don't. It's just these constant. I mean, another thing is, I mean, I hate these wars. I want these people to come home. I want I want these bases to be closed. I want to protect, if you're going to do anything, protect the homeland. That's what Ron Paul always talked about. Yeah. But if you want to end the wars, you got to put elites in there that want to end the wars. Posting on Twitter, great. I've changed people's minds on Twitter by posting stuff. I don't think I've changed any elites' minds on Twitter by posting stuff. So let's, let's take, I'm not even gonna say, let's just take that into consideration. It's just a consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of elites, like I was reading this book at work today, and my coworker of mine asked me about it, and he's somewhat politically aware. He's a Catholic, so he's kind of like outside the mainstream political stuff, but not super into all of it. And he's like, who are the elites? Like, who are these people you would say are the elites? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you names. They only say classes of elites, like intellectual class, media class, the Satanists, obviously, because I think Satan's the top of all of it. And we started discussing, like, what are the classes of the elites, and some people say there's only three classes. There's like there's politicians, the natural elites, and like the intellectual class. I think there's probably more than that. If you had to guess or have the answer for that, well, how many classes of elites are there?
Well, I mean, historically, I guess Pareto would say there's. Is it Pareto who says there's two? They're
class one, class two.
Class one. Yeah, and class one and class two. But I mean, now when you take, I mean, he was writing before the internet technology. I mean, so you have to think about the elites that control communication. the elites that I mean, all right, the academy is one, obviously, government's one, the media is another one. Yarvin says they're all three of those are part of the same group, so it's like, but big tech has to be thrown in there as well now, and I think that's a big one. And after 2020, I mean, pharmaceuticals has to have their own set of elites. Medicine has to have their own set of elites. So I mean, it's tough. Andrew's saying it was Pareto. Yeah, Pareto. Pareto was talked about 2 classes, but yeah, there's more now. I mean, and obviously, I mean, look at when Pareto was writing compared to now. So,
yeah. On the I had a question. I just lost it. I'm gonna go to a different question. A lot of people say you get called black pilled a lot. I get called black pilled. A lot of people who talk about elite theory get called black pilled. I want to talk about, if you don't mind, Curtis Yarvin's recent piece he wrote with the dark elf and elves example.
I didn't read it. I didn't. I heard it discussed. Oren discussed it on his podcast, and I heard it there, and that's it. I didn't read it.
Okay.
I didn't have time.
It's all good. I only read it because I wanted to see what everyone was talking about, and I don't think he's wrong in anything he says in it. But it seems like a lot of people were using it as the example to say, oh, when you buy into elite theory, it means you only accept that elites can fix things, so you're black pill until you get your own elites, and that's just a daunting task. It inherently leads to you being black pilled about reality, which I don't get that at all.
Well, it's not true, because there are a lot of people. I mean, there are tons of people in this country who are thriving and living beautiful lives with beautiful families, happy as can be, and because they don't like watch TV or pay attention to politics. It's like, it's easy to become black pilled when your whole thing is talking about politics, and some of us are burdened with that. Some of us feel compelled to do it. Some of us feel like that's the mission that we have. But I mean, you go to your supermarket locally, and you can just, I guarantee you, a quarter of the people you talk to in there are, they don't have that burden, and it's not really hitting them, and you could talk about taxation all you want. It's like, all right, they're taking away 50 to 60% of your income when you take into account all the kind of taxes that you can pay. People are still happy. Maybe that's ignorance is bliss, but like I said, maybe these people don't have. I cut the cord on cable TV in 2014, 2015. I pretty much get all of my news off the internet, and I really only pay attention to really one section of news that I think is, one facet of the whole what's going on that I think is the most important at this point. But because I don't think the Federal Reserve will, even if like the dollar collapsed tomorrow, they'd have a currency ready. They already have a currency ready to replace it, and people will be begging for it. And the wars, really, people are, oh, end the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve's not going anywhere. People want it. People have been, I mean, and it doesn't matter whether they want it naturally or they've been trained to want it. It really doesn't matter. So we're not getting rid of the Federal Reserve anytime soon. So you got to figure out a way around all of this. And I really think it is local politics, but I think it's local politics done the right way.
Yeah.
People, reading Hoppe's What Must Be Done and missing the part about explicitly right-wing, orderly. Man, that's like, that's like baking a cake and forgetting flour. I mean, it's what's going to make it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to say to people. Because I mean, and here,
hey man, we're here. They're just here to destroy power. They're just here to destroy power.
And I'm laughing because I'm laughing at myself 2.5 years ago. I believed all this bullshit.
Yeah,
I believed all this stuff that I've been fed. And all they have to do, they don't even have to leave libertarianism. They could just read Hoppe.
Yeah.
What's funny is I interview all of these like dissident right guys, and I recently talked to Tim Kelly from Our Interesting Times, and you talk to these guys, and they all, and even like Z-Man. I interviewed Z-Man recently.
Yeah.
They all crap on libertarianism, except if you bring up Hoppe. They all instinctively know that Hoppe's right. But libertarians are going to push back against it because libertarianism has been completely subverted by leftism.
Yeah.
And leftism looks at Hoppe and they see fascist, right winger, pick your term for progressive bingo. And that's where we are.
Yeah, the libertarian label is gone. I love the Hoppians. I've talked to many of them about why they probably should drop. In my opinion, they should drop the word libertarian, and I get loads of pushback on that one because they are just so tied to that word for some reasons I can't fathom. I don't know why they want to be associated with all the people who claim to be libertarians, like Vaus, the socialist libertarian. There's zero in common between that guy and someone like Jared from In Democracy, and yet they both want to be called libertarians. I don't see it. I don't see why anyone would want to do that.
Well, I mean, didn't the Libertarian Party of Texas invite Vaush to come and talk? And I mean, why do I want to be associated with that? It's like I was invited to go to Young Americans for Liberty to their conference. They offered to pay for me to go. I said no. They're run by friggin' neocons now. They're run by people who like cheer on Liz Cheney because Liz Cheney is anti-Trump. It's like, well, okay. Well, I mean, I realize that Trump wasn't the savior and that he was just turned out to be a real scumbag. I mean, I would have, before I left, I would have pardoned every one of those people on January 6th for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just blanket pardons. But I mean, I'm not going to go. Why do really the only I mean, there might be some libertarian events that I go to and everything, but they're going to be decidedly right wing. I went to Ron Paul's event recently, and I mostly went to that. I was in Houston because Ryan Dawson was in from Japan, and I wanted to hang out with him. But I mean, it's still, I have no problem going to a Ron Paul event because it's explicitly right wing. Why am I going to, I don't know. I don't get it anymore. It's just like, it's not, I could make excuses through 2019. Once 2020 hit and I saw people making excuses for the lockdowns, making excuses for the jabs and the masks and all this stuff, even prominent quote unquote libertarians, maybe even one or two associated with the Mises Institute. I mean, and it's always like this. I mean, I'm sorry, this is defending mandates. Well, I don't think they should be mandated, but it really is a good idea. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself. I mean, you're not being as explicit as Cato, but you are telling us your preference, and you are, and it's one of those things, like the thing Michael Malice says, anything before but in a political statement, just ignore it. You're telling me what you believe by what you say after the but. So,
back to the book. Samuel Francis, in one of the later chapters, he wrote about how ideology and how ideology does affect the elites. That they have an ideology. Is there a foregoing intellectual elite today who actually is the ideological thinker for people around today, or is it kind of just all the ones who were the ideological forerunner are dead? It's kind of just their ideas are just manifesting themselves through the elites today, or is there a guy out there somewhere writing and talking who is the intellectual elite?
Well, it depends. What are you talking about? Who would be on our side?
No, on their side. Who is the leftist elite that is?
Oh, the leftist elite. I mean, a thought leader.
Yeah.
I mean, they
is there one?
They probably look at. I bet a lot of them still look at Chomsky. Yeah, I bet a lot of them still look at Chomsky, especially since he's, hates Russia and was a COVID, was into COVID tyranny. Yeah. I mean, that's one person I can think of. But I mean, when it comes to a real intellectual, I mean, what even is that anymore?
Yeah.
Someone who reads books. I mean, I don't know. You have to have a PhD after your name in order to be an intellectual.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was asked a question a while ago, and my answer was Chomsky and the Ghost of Leo Strauss. Those are my two answers. those are the guys I would pick. But that's one thing. Like trying to I have a friend who's an English major who wants to go be a professor. And he's right wing. He's Catholic. He wants to go to Catholic school and teach, but he's going to like a leftist college because it's the only one near him. And the amount of books his teachers, hey, go read this book, and they slide on some book on like why white people are evil and the how to teach CRT to like toddlers or some shit like that. He's just sending me all these books that all these like the intellectual classes propaganda books pretty much to give out to the students. It's been fun going through some of the books because it's just straight up evil. Like the books are getting like straight up, it's like the war on the family. Why it's good, basically. It's but why?
Well, I mean, save those books too. Don't burn them.
Oh no, I've been reading them.
When after these leftists get lined up against a wall, people are going to wonder why. We can show them the evidence.
I like it. So why is there? It's clearly it seems clear to me there is a war on the family from the elites. Why is that? If you have the answer, why is that?
Because they need to be in control of the populace, and families, and especially white families, have a tendency to be more independent than any other family. They don't need to rely on the government as much. So if you want to have a populace that looks to you for everything, you have to take the strongest and the strongest people and declare war on them. And that's pretty much why. That's why you see a war on the family and you see a war on white people.
Yeah, I would agree. Back to the book. We keep getting off topic from the book and going back to the book.
This is all about the book.
Oh yeah, it's all connected. It's all about the elites. Out of all the chapters and the different people he wrote about, James Burnham, Samuel Francis, Pareto, what's one of you if you read, what's one of you enjoyed reading the most out of those groups? Like is it Burnham? Is it Francis? Like who's someone in that group that you've enjoyed reading and you'd recommend other people go out and read as well?
I really do enjoy Burnham because especially for the time he was writing and where he came from was interesting. I liked the Juvenal because he's like probably the least of a scholar amongst most of them, of what most would call an intellectual. But once you start getting into Carl Schmitt and you start Carl Schmitt just has one line that just tells you what government is better than anyone else. It's he who makes the exception.
Yeah.
It says the one who says, okay, no one's allowed to kill except this person, except this group. And then also Schmitt talks about friend enemy distinction too, and that's really important. But yeah, I know one of my friends, Christian, said that listening to Schmitt, reading Schmitt on the exception, that really I guess you just something you never really think of until someone puts it in terms like that, and you're just like, oh. It was like the first time I read John C. Calhoun, his disquisition on government, and he said that the reason it really screwed me up because I was still holding on to libertarianism pretty hard and non-Hoppian libertarianism. And he said that the reason that you need a government is because when it comes down to it, people have more self-interest. So if they're going to be more interested in themselves and their family than their neighbor and their neighbor's family. So somebody has to be there to be able to, in case there's an emergency, to have dictate order between that person and their neighbor. And now we know the government doesn't do that, but in theory, talking about theory. And what made me laugh about that when I was reading it and almost dropped the book was that's the same argument that like free market economists make for why laissez-faire will work because of self-interest. And I'm not convinced of that so much anymore. You know, it's like when people make arguments, I mean, I believe that the freer in the market, the the better off people will be. But I also believe that on a much smaller scale. You know, libertarians turn out to be globalists a lot of times. They
Yeah.
believe that the whole world needs to be libertarian, and that's just horseshit. It's not going to happen ever.
Like the
30,
libertarian,
50, 100 people, you know.
yeah, the universal market libertarians. I like Bob Murphy. I can't read chaos theory. I've tried. It's just it seems any like Ace. I love Ace. Ace is great. He went on Continental to talk about anarchism, and he just all he did was talk about like the market, like universal market version of anarchism, not even one form like a covenant community style. And I'm like, if you're gonna talk to a right wing person, you gotta talk about the covenant communities. Going with like the universal market style of anarchism doesn't convince many people.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It has so many problems. I don't think it would work.
Sure. And if you're going to do communities of 30, 50, or 100, or 150 probably at most, it doesn't mean you're not trading with other people.
Yeah.
It just means that that's how your economy is going to function best. But yeah, I mean, you ask people, okay, so you'll ask Ace, well, how will this work? And he'll tell you, and it's like, okay, prove it. I mean, because it's all theory. It hasn't worked before. It hasn't worked before. And places, and what's funny is whenever they bring up places like medieval Iceland or Ireland, places like that, where isn't it strange that it's a homogenous society of people who are probably mostly related to each other?
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? So it's just like the progressives. Whenever the progressives say, "Oh, we should be more like Sweden," oh, you mean that country that used to be completely homogenous, or Iceland, where like they have a dating app that you put your name and the person who you're going to date's name into it so that you can see if you're related because that's how 300,000 people. So
Yeah.
and they're pretty much probably all related. So
let's see here. Let's talk about the managerial elites for a little bit. That was James Burnham's book, Managerial Revolution.
Once you see that, you can never unsee it, man. Oh
Yeah.
my god! Especially
Like,
through COVID. If people don't believe in managerial elites who lived through COVID, I can't help them.
Yeah, it's too far gone. I mean, his Burnham books go, I think it's Suicide Arrest, Managerial Elites, Machiavellians. It goes through this like, I think Suicide Arrest might be my favorite political book. Like it's so good.
It's definitely my favorite Burnham book. When I read that, I was like, oh wow, okay, I get it now. And the best way to read that book is read it while you're reading Sam Francis's review of it, because Buck Johnson and I did that on my show, where we sat there and we read through his, I think it was 12 or 13 page like cliff notes of Suicide of the West, and it floors you. And what's funny is Buck and I had underlined all the same stuff. It's just so obvious that when he's talking about it.
Yeah, Sam Francis. I'm going through Beautiful Losers now because I'm having Taylor and Jared on for a book club of it, and
cool.
Francis is just incredible. I mean, the more I read him, the more I'm just blown away how like makes me really hate Nesta Sousa. Like the more I read Francis, the more I hate Nesta Sousa.
Yeah.
He's just awful.
I mean, he's a right-wing gatekeeper. That's what he is. There's a whole bunch of people on the right. I mean, Jonah Goldberg is a clown. I mean, the guy has a fucking clown nose and clown shoes. He has to, because he's a clown. He wrote liberal fascism. Where do I start?
I can't.
Where do I start? I mean, how many people have destroyed that term. Read Paul Gottfried's book on it. He has a book on fascism and a book on anti-fascism.
Mm-hmm.
You can really find out what they actually mean and stop using these fucking terms. Stop just destroying these terms.
Yeah.
Come on. It's just, but there are gatekeepers on the right. You saw it when Ben Domenech attacked Pedro Gonzalez on Twitter and called him a barrio Nazi. Ben Domenech is a right-wing gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need leftists. When a right-winger starts drifting further to the right, you don't need to worry about leftists calling them a fascist. Their quote unquote own people will do that.
Yeah.
They will do that every single time.
Yeah. At this point, anyone in the mainstream right is just an authorized right winger. It's the authorized right. That's all it is.
Yeah.
I think like the only real mainstream right wing person I can think of is like Pedro and Tucker. They're the only ones really was paying attention. Like, and Pedro is fantastic. I then, but first time I heard about Pedro was his $15 minimum wage argument he made when I was like a peak libertarianism. Like this guy's a loser, and I just ignored him.
Yeah,
and you interviewed him on your show all this like a couple months later. I'm like, oh no, this guy's pretty awesome. He makes sense. Sort of just stuck to it.
I think the first time I saw Pedro was on Tucker, and it was very impressive. He's very impressive. Yeah.
Anyone who's writing for Chronicle is normally top tier.
Oh yeah, if someone's writing for Chronicles, I'm not worried about them. I'm pretty much accepting where they are. And of course, they talk about Robert Michel's Iron Law of Oligarchy. Yeah, I will say this because I've actually talked to. I won't say this, okay, because it was a private conversation. I don't have but one of the things now that the Mises Caucus has taken over the Libertarian Party, I want them to be good. I want them to do something with it, even if it's just messaging, whatever it is. Do it. If it's going to be local politics, hardcore right-wing local politics. But like when you start talking about the Iron Law of Oligarchy, how basically the ideologues are, even if they take over, they're not going to be in charge very long. It's always going to be the oligarchs. And one thing that I noticed right off the bat was they were celebrating so hard Todd Hagopian being like the treasurer. And this guy is a leftist. He wanted to vaccinate kids. He marched with BLM. This guy is horrifying.
Yeah.
And they put him in a position of bureaucracy, oligarchy, whatever you want to call it. They put him in a position that the person who gets positions like that usually takes over the party, usually ends up taking over the party, because the people who are ideologues, eventually they're worried about the ideology. They're out there, it's messaging and everything like that. While behind the scenes, the ones who are all about bureaucracy and centralizing take over. I can't believe they did that. And then they celebrated it. And I'm just like, oh.
Yeah. The whole what's his name? Hector Roos, the guy running for governor of Florida. That
guy's another clown.
Yeah, I'm interviewing him next week, I think. Maybe 2 weeks later. It'll be fantastic. The fact that the Libertarian Party didn't authorize his running and he just ran anyway by like a local system that locally supported him. All I could do was laugh at the libertarian love of decentralization bit him in the ass and made everyone who said if not going to run against DeSantis a liar. Like if they just centralized it a little bit more, this wouldn't have happened. But they loved the ideology so much they decentralized their own political party, and it's just causing all this shit now.
Yeah. So Andrew's over here saying Hector completely contradicts their messaging on Shane Hazel. But then again, Shane Hazel's for destroying power. And I like Shane Hazel. I've hung out with Shane Hazel. Shane Hazel is a friend of mine. And he talks about destroying power. I mean, oh my God. When I was in my biggest Lawbird phase, I always knew that somebody was going to have power. Another reason why Hoppe is really the only has put together the system. The libertarians, if you want libertarianism, if you want privacy, private cities, things like that, he's the only one to follow, because he understands that power is always going to exist. There's a set amount of power in this world. I'm convinced of this, okay? Because think about it this way. If there was an imperial king over the whole world, he would only be able to wield so much power. There would come to a point where he couldn't have any more power. So that is the limit on power in this world. As it's decentralized and you have different countries, that power is split up, but it always exists. And that's what people are fighting over. Some people are getting more of it. Some people want more of it. Some people have some taken away. But that power always, it doesn't disappear. It's always, you would have to basically kill everyone on the planet to get rid of power, or have somehow breed into, like have a shift in evolution where nobody on Earth wants power anymore.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem to be logical when you study humans.
Yeah. So it's almost like they have no power. Everyone have to be, even if you put two guys in a room, one guy's stronger than the other guy, that guy has power over the smaller guy. And so there's no, unless everyone is all of a sudden perfectly equal and egalitarian, then maybe you could give it a power then. But it's just, it seems to coincide perfectly with the liberals wanting egalitarianism, also the want to destroy power now. It just seems to kind of line up there.
But if you had somebody who, did that, there would still be people vying for power again. You would have to use power to suppress people's want for power.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing about the United States. The United States could be, the freest country on the planet if they followed their founding documents. But the problem is they weren't going to wield the power it takes to crush the ideologies that destroy liberty. And as a matter of fact, they adopted classical liberalism, which is live and let live, which is the quote unquote marketplace of ideas, which is I don't agree with, I disagree with you, but I'll fight to the death for you to have a wrong opinion. I mean, all that stuff is just leads to totalitarianism. It's a friggin' psyop. It's like, what does Rachel Tobias say? Said psyops and false flags, or psyops and false flags, or something like that, or common sense goy control.
The marketplace of ideas, that was one of the things. I think it was your episode was Curtis Yarvin when he heard him go after that, when I realized, okay, I clearly don't believe him now anymore. Like, he just completely broke me of the idea of marketplace of ideas. Like Curtis Yarvin does a lot of things. I see a random podcast with him on some random topic. I'll listen to that, and I'm just like, okay, he's right. I can't listen to that one anymore. Gotta move on.
I mean, don't agree with him 100% on a lot of things, but he can definitely shatter a lot of really bad arguments, pretty much any dogma that comes out of classical liberalism. So
I know I've noticed. Let me see. I want to see if you've noticed it as well. Most libertarians can't stand Hamilton, but it seems like more right wing or more neo-reactionary a libertarian gets, the more they kind of get respect for Hamilton. Has the same thing happened to you, where you kind of not like Hamilton, you kind of like change your views on Hamilton?
Yeah. I mean, I still understand how bad central banking is, but at least he understood that government was going to have corruption. Yeah. That's absolutely. I think there's Michael Malice quotes the line all the time that somebody was saying the best thing about the American Constitution is the lack of corruption. And Hamilton said the best thing about the French Constitution is the corruption, because corruption is built into central planning and government. So, I mean, you might as well start out with it. You might as well read it into the hand. Read it into what you're doing. So,
absolutely. Let's see. Let's talk about the therapeutic state. This is actually what I knew quite a bit about going into it, because I covered was Mark Metz's Paul Gottfried's book on the therapeutic state, and I thought that book was just spot on and incredible. And of course, AA condenses it and covers most of the ideas in that book in probably 8 pages.
I mean, it's like you can't even go through this book. You end up underlining everything.
Yeah,
because that's the way he wrote it. He cut out all the fat and just gave you the meat. And it's like my whole book is just, it's like Imperium. The first time I went through Imperium, I was like, okay, well, I got a couple lines here, a couple lines there. Second time I'm going through Imperium, I'm just like underline everything, underline everything, underline everything.
Yeah.
All right, what am I gonna do?
100%. It's something like I know it's like a good academic work does that. Like if you ever read Ed Feser's Philosophy of the Mind, he condenses like entire like schools of thought in like 1 page. And it's like good academic. A good academic can do that. When you read it, when you see a good academic do his work like that, it's just so impressive. And you compare it to other academic work, which are just nothing but fluff. It's just it really shows how sad and how decrepit our education system is nowadays, where the academics that are coming out of it just kind of suck.
Well, if they can't tell you, if they can't give you the information, what on what that can fit on 1 page, if they need 10 pages, they're just trying to show you how smart they are. It has more to say about them than it has to say about anyone else. AA could have made this book 500, 600 pages long, but he made it 147 pages long. I mean, I read this book in 2 days. I could have read it all in 1 day, but I'm lazy. So I split it up into 2 days. And you read this book twice. Even people who aren't, I read this book having a pretty good working knowledge of elite theory, but you read this through twice. And I mean, first of all, if you're a libertarian, if you're still calling yourself a libertarian after that, you should be calling yourself a Hoppian, because it's the only thing that makes sense after that, or, this may just destroy liberty. You may come to the conclusion that it's just, even that's not workable. I don't agree with that, because Hoppe's talking about local level. He's talking about 10,000 Liechtensteins. And I believe that that's workable. I don't believe that 10,000 is workable. Eventually, I think you would need a bunch of Liechtensteins that people are looking at and they're like, hey, we really should do that. So they play copycat. And so I think that's workable. But like, I was thinking today, I forget who I was listening to, but I know people who are libertarian universalists. They believe that libertarianism is for everyone in the world. I mean, that's just globalism.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a globalist mindset. So, I mean, that can't work. I mean, unless you're a globalist, unless you're a leftist. But I don't know.
It seems like implicit in several libertarian type of arguments is like, one, the globalist, materialistic morality, and like they also seem to be universalist when they're like, no, everyone has equal rights. That just sounds like egalitarian. It seems to be the most distilled, perfected form of the liberal syndrome that Burnham writes about in Suicide of the West. Like I was reading that book, like, this is about liberals. I kept like, why is he describing my friends online?
Yeah. Well, pedophiles do not have the same rights as somebody who, steals shoplifts. Sorry, it's just not true. And there are, and I think that what did Z-Man say? He said that libertarianism works if you have a bunch of 120 IQ suburban white guys who can figure out how not to reproduce who can figure out how to reproduce without women. That's basically
this bunch of he's not wrong.
No,
it's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's let's see. Well, I think we've covered most of it. I think the only thing we didn't talk about was the circulation of elites. So let's kind of talk about that one. I think we've covered all the best parts of the book.
Yeah, I mean, what we basically started talking about was that if you're there are always elites, but they're not static. Yeah. Some people drop out, and a lot of that has to do with some people become elites by knocking out other elites. Some people stop being elites because they lose their fortune, they lose their influence, they suffer a scandal, something like that. Which is why, and this has happened throughout history. This is you can go back to clans. Clans were run by elites. I mean, they didn't call them elites, but if you examine who they are, they're elites.
Yeah.
And this is why Hoppe, if you're still a libertarian, Hoppe is really the one you have to be studying, because he's the only one who writes about elites. He figured it out, because I know Murray read a bunch of these guys, but and I wonder if Murray would have lived if he would have written more about that, because I know he and Hoppe had to talk about it a lot, but Hoppe wrote about it, and the people that Nima writes about in this book, Hoppe read them all. Yeah. He knows them all. He quotes the Juvenal all the time. I mean, it's obvious. So when I look at it, it's like, okay, so I read For a New Liberty by Rothbard, and there's some great stuff in there, but it's not and he lays out how to get there, but it's not reasonable. Yeah. It's not in reality. Then you read Hoppe, and what's one of the first things he talks about in what must be done? Identifying natural elites, identifying the pillars of the community locally, and getting them on your side and talking to them, and how to even recognize who they are. He gets it. He gets it. I mean, he just gets it. I mean, I mean, that's one thing that people will take out of reading this book, which is another reason why I think a lot of people just don't want to read the book. It's like a lot of Christians do not want to read any book that criticizes Christianity. Why? Because they have weak faith.
Yeah.
So it's like, I did it. I read some of the German liberals, and they helped me to see some things. But I'm talking about like Ernst Käsemann and Karl Barth, who textual criticism, things like that. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think they will tell you, I don't want to read. Libertarians will tell you, I don't want to read this book because it's a waste of my time. I already know what's in there. They don't know how things work. We do. But the ones that do want to take the time to read 147 pages or listen to 5-6 hours,
if that. I mean, it's like 30 minutes a chapter, 8 chapters.
Yeah. So go ahead, do that, and you'll learn something. Even if you don't agree, at least you can know the argument. At least you can argue why it's wrong, why you think it's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you. It's easy for me to be like, okay, this is why I don't think that this part of libertarianism, that most of libertarianism except Hoppe, is going to work, because I read all those books. I used to teach about that. I did 400 or 500 episodes on that. Mm-hmm. I think I have it down, and I think I understand why it just doesn't work. Why 2020 happened. So
this is a real problem with a lot of libertarians. You can always tell when a libertarian stops reading, and you can always tell when one of them stops reading outside their own tradition. Like, there are guys who every paycheck they buy books from the Mises Institute. Never buy anything outside. If it's not on the Mises Institute, they don't want to read it. And I don't blame them. There's a lot of great stuff on the Mises Institute. I mean, you can get all of Eric von Kadutler on the Mises Institute, but there's a lot of books outside like the libertarian tradition. Like, all these books on myself are all libertarian. It's like 8 who aren't libertarian. There's a lot of great books. There's a lot of great books that aren't libertarian that need to be read. Like this one, like Yaki, this one, Evola, just all these books that really need to be read. I got one more question before we wrap it up. If anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
Oh, anything I want to say? I mean, I just encourage people to get this book and read it. Like I said, it's 147 pages and another almost 20 pages full of footnotes. He has footnotes throughout. So that tells you how big the book really is. It's 147 pages, but there's footnotes at the bottom of the page everywhere. So it's really like 110 pages, and it's all meat. He tells you where he's getting all of this stuff from, and just compare it to the real world. Compare it to real politic. Real politic is looking at politics and taking emotion out of it. Because, for as many atheists as there are in libertarianism, there are some emotional motherfuckers. And, and they are some appeal to metaphysics, motherfuckers. This is wrong. This is evil. What?
Yeah.
I mean, you're making fun of Christians, and you're making fun of religion. So maybe you should shut up.
This is evil. Define evil. Evil is things I don't consent to.
Yeah.
Come on.
Evil is like, dude, I can get arrested for having weed. That's evil. Maybe. But still, why?
It's a lot lesser. A lot lesser.
Yeah, why? Yeah, why is it? The book's amazing. I mean, I'm honestly considering doing like a podcast series of reading each chapter for an episode because I think people have to hear this. It's so, and I asked this in another group that I'm in, a group of people who are more dissident, right? And the ones who read it, they're just like, it's just perfect. It's exactly what, if people took the time to read it, they'd really understand why, a lot of people like go through libertarianism. Remember when they were making fun, like I'm doing a series. Well, it's not really a series. It's just me 2 episodes. Hoppa's libertarianism and the alt-right. And people were like, libertarianism is the pipeline to the alt-right. Well, when you get into libertarianism and you realize that like they have no answer for drag queen story hour except those public libraries shouldn't exist, and all the other just ridiculous things that I used to say, war and the military, taxes and the IRS.
So many of those arguments they make, like there's like one paragraph from Murray Rothbard in Against the Left by Lou Rockwell that like he writes about we have to let the homeless guys think up the library or UPS lose everyone's packages. Clearly no. Like that one paragraph it's amongst all the arguments from Rothbard himself, but they want to ignore it because Lou Rockwell wrote it, and it's 90s Rothbard who was evil, and it's so full of shit.
Yeah.
It's mostly what I see.
Well, sure, it's because it's so easy. It doesn't take any thought. You get to be right all the time, quote unquote. You get to be right all the time. Yeah. I told you so. I told you so. I mean, and I hate this because Lou is like one of the biggest influences on me in the world, and he starts out with the Left, Right, and the State, the book that like really bent my mind when I first read it, saying a libertarian should never grow tired of saying, I told you so. Well, when kids are getting groomed, maybe saying I told you so, we shouldn't have public schools, I told you so, we shouldn't have libraries. Maybe that's not the time to make that argument. I mean, I don't think most people don't want to hear it. Your echo chamber is going to give you likes and retweets and the dopamine hit, it's going to be amazing. But your whole culture is being distorted. And if you think things are bad now, what are they going to look like in 10 or 20 years?
I think probably a little worse than Weimar Germany. It's more along those lines.
Well, what's funny is if you start studying Weimar Germany, it's worse now. I mean, it's there. Yeah. And, of course, because technology allows it to be worse. But yeah, I mean, just read this book. I mean, it's a short book, but Nima AA did an amazing job doing this. I mean, I'm impressed. I was in DMs with him telling him, because I interviewed him about it a few months ago, but I really scanned, he sent me a PDF and I scanned it and I took out highlights, and there was a lot of stuff that I already knew, but when you said you wanted to do this, I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and read it. I'm going to study it. And I mean, I was blown away, and I got in DMs with him and I told him, I said, would you mind if I'm thinking about reading it on my podcast over a bunch of episodes? And he's like, no, go ahead and do it and everything. So,
awesome.
Yeah, just read this. I mean, come on. What do you have to lose? I love learning new stuff, It's like, come on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, last question. If you could recommend 3 books to libertarians, if you were trying to get someone out of libertarianism, what would be the 3 books you'd recommend?
Well, I'm going to make one of those books a libertarian book. Well, not a libertarian book, but a Hoppian book to keep them. So if their identity is really in libertarianism, read Getting Libertarianism Right by Hoppe. It's 4 of his speeches, and I'm in the process of reading on my show now. The second two of we already did one, which was oh god, I always forget the name of it. A Realistic Libertarianism, which destroys the libertarians are neither left nor right garbage. And now we're doing the one on libertarianism and the alt-right. And so read Hoppe, okay? Read this book, The Populist Delusion by Nima Parvini. And I would read The Enemy of Europe by Francis Parker Yockey. The reason I say read The Enemy of Europe by Francis Parker Yockey is because if you tell somebody to start with a new author and you hand them a 600-page book, most of the time they're not going to do it. Yeah. But The Enemy of Europe is 90 pages, I think. There are footnotes galore from Imperium in there, and you will get an idea of what Yockey was trying to communicate. I mean, he was American. He was an American. So listen to him. He watched what was happening in World War II. He watched the United States ally with the commies. And then he was part of the legal team for the Nuremberg trials. And if you read Kerry Bolton's introduction to Imperium, if you get a version that has that, then you'll get a background on Yockey, and he talks about Yockey and Nuremberg and what he saw happening at Nuremberg, and how Nuremberg is much more than a trial where Nazis were put on trial. It basically created the culture of politics in the West from then until now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's something Paul Goffey wrote about in Multiculturalism. He writes about how basically all the ideas of cancel culture and institutional side of cancel culture originated in post-World War II Germany, his practice to get rid of Nazi sentiments in the German population.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book.
And what they did to the German people after that war was, I mean, they basically they tried to exterminate the German people. They made rape of German women legal. You could rape. Russians were raping German women in the streets, and it was acceptable. Americans were stealing German houses and living in German houses. I mean, these are just
sounds very similar to something happening in the Middle East right now.
I wonder who the architects of that was.
Well, Pete, thanks so much for coming on. What can people find you at? What are your plugs?
The Pete Quinones Show podcast and my Substack, petessubstack.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a fantastic episode. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you.
If you're listening, you know where to find me on Twitter. Make sure you like, share, comment this video. Have a good night.